Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. The Trudeau government says it wants to reach a deal that will satisfy Indigenous families that have been shortchanged by the child welfare system, but has set up a very tight timeline to achieve such an ambitious goal. APTN's Fraser Needham explains.
Canada filed an appeal late Friday afternoon, challenging a decision that would see billions flow to Indigenous families affected by the child welfare system. That appeal seeks to overturn the court decision which upheld the findings of the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. It required the government to compensate all Indigenous families who have had children taken into care as a result of underfunding, paying them up to $40,000 per family and retroactive to 2006. Justice Minister David Lametti says the appeal will allow the parties to work on bigger things.
We're here putting the appeal on ice, so putting it in abeyance precisely because we think we can arrive at a solution that's comprehensive and global, that includes not only what the CHRT was trying to do, but also touches the 2 and now 3 class actions, as well as putting the long-term reform in place.
Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu says the government wants to make sure all Indigenous families are fairly compensated and no child is left behind.
We want to work with the parties to make sure that we get to the end goal, which is to compensate people who have been harmed and to create a better system, an equitable system, a compassionate system, so that no more harm is done.
The only problem is that the government has a very small window to get such a major deal in place. They want a signed agreement by the end of the year. Kim Bodin of the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples says he is not sure they can do it.
Unless they're working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I don't know. I don't know if they can even reach that because, yeah, there'll be some tough negotiations, and I hope our leaders do the right thing and ensure that they protect and our children, our Indigenous children. I hope they do that.
So far, the Liberals have been vague on how much they are willing to spend or how they will fix a child welfare system that has been broken for decades. I'm Fraser Needham, APTN News, Ottawa.
University of Saskatchewan professor Carrie Bourassa is under fire for claiming that she is Indigenous. A CBC investigation that broke last week publicly challenged her identity, but the university is standing by her, saying in a statement that Bourassa was not hired for her Indigenous ancestry and that she was a, quote, highly valued and widely respected health researcher. Winona Ryder is an Indigenous Studies professor at the University of Saskatchewan. She joins me now to unpack what's happened. Winona, thank you so much for joining us. You're one of the professors who investigated Bourassa's claims. Tell us what you found in researching that.
What we found was that Dr. Carrie Bourassa doesn't have a drop of Indigenous blood in her, and that she has been faking her identity for at least 20 years, from the time that I was at First Nations University back in the early 2000s, all the way up to the present.
And is there any reason as to why? Like, do we know why this was going on? Has anybody asked her?
No, I haven't asked her personally. I haven't come across any interviews that have asked her personally, because her position is, and she is standing firm on that, is that she is Indigenous, and she's not seeming to back down on that, even though we have documentation to prove otherwise.
You know, and a number of institutions are defending her. You know, what's your reaction to that? I mean, after all the research you did, you present your case, and you see people still drawing that line in the sand and saying we're on this side of it.
Well, that's what happens when you have imposters moving into positions of authority and power. I mean, she holds some pretty heavy positions, both at the University of Saskatchewan and with the Canadian Institute of Health Research. So they're defending her. Their first response was defend her. They're, you know, as opposed to maybe listening to what we had to say and maybe reviewing what we had to share with them, their first reaction was to protect her. And that speaks to their integrity. You know, in the Canadian Institute, CIHR, their position is self-identification is all they need. So they're perpetuating racism. They're perpetuating this intellectual colonialism. They're perpetuating the creation and emergence of pretend Indians, because they won't put criteria in place.
Well, and what, I mean, I guess speaking to that, what needs to happen? You know, in this day and age, we're seeing these pretendians being outed more and more. What should be happening to prevent this from more of them from taking up these spaces?
Well, the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan here has put out a statement saying that all university institutions, post-secondary institutions, should be working with them to determine whether or not an individual is actually a Métis from Saskatchewan. Mm-hmm. But the university hasn't responded to that. I think the institutions need to work with Indigenous communities, authentic Indigenous communities, and establish mechanisms by which we can evaluate whether or not a person is what they claim to be. Yeah. And I don't think that's all that big a deal, because when I apply for a job and a PhD is a requirement, I have to provide evidence that I have a PhD. So if the job is targeted for Indigenous, if the research grant isn't targeted for Indigenous, then I think that that's really important. Yeah. But I think the issue is that she's been caught in a lie, and the university is still defending her. CIHR is still defending her. And that speaks to integrity. You know, that speaks to the integrity of the person, but also the integrity of the institutions. Yeah, yeah. You know, at the university, we have academic misconduct regulations, and one of those is impersonation. This is clearly a situation of impersonation.
Well, I guess we're going to have to watch and see where it goes from here, if the pressure is going to be applied and what these institutions are all going to do an about-face, or if they're going to continue to stand their ground by here. But thank you for joining us and for all the work that you've done on this file.
Thank you.
That is Winona Wheeler. I don't know where my head is at, still stuck in Halloween movies, I guess. Since this is just coming in right now, Professor Carrie Bourassa declined an interview with APTN, saying that her PR team will be in touch with us. Bourassa also worked as a scientific director with the Canadian Institutes of Health Research in Indigenous Health, as we just heard in that interview. She has just now stepped down from that role. Moments ago, CIHR President Michael J. Strong sent a statement saying, in part, "Today I spoke with Dr. Carrie Bourassa, and we agreed that she will step away from all of her duties as scientific director of the Institute. As such, Dr. Bourassa will be on an indefinite leave without pay, effective immediately." Well, the Nunavut Impact Review Board has begun the last round of hearings about the Baffinland Mary River iron ore project. The mine is looking to double in size despite some active local opposition. Our Kent Driscoll joins from outside the Iqaluit Hotel where these meetings are taking place. Kent, considering the state of emergency in Iqaluit now in its third week as the city's water supply is contaminated by a fuel leak, why are these hearings even happening right now?
It really is a sign of how badly the Nunavut Impact Review Board wants to finish these hearings. You can't drink the water in Iqaluit right now due to fuel in the water supply. But the meetings at this hotel are going ahead regardless. Now, these hearings were supposed to happen back in April, but a second outbreak of COVID-19 prevented them from happening here in Iqaluit. So now the pressure is on to finish these hearings, which will make a recommendation on the Mary River iron ore mine in North Baffin, whether they'll be allowed to expand. Now, this has been a hot topic in Nunavut, especially in the North Baffin region. This mine is located in between Arctic Bay and Pond Inlet. Back in February, a group of activists shut down the mine for a week by camping on the runway, preventing flights from getting through, and those protesters say the mine has been disastrous for nearby wildlife. On the other hand, you have some communities that are touting the benefits of this mine economically, especially when you consider how hard it can be to find a job in Nunavut. Now, once these meetings wrap, the Nunavut Impact Review Board will make a recommendation to the new Minister of Northern Affairs, Dan Vandal. Now, he doesn't have to accept it. That means this decision is ultimately up to the federal government, not anybody in this hotel. Back to you in Winnipeg.
Thank you for that, Kent. We want to hear what you think about the mine project or about Iqaluit still in its third week having no drinkable water. Here's how you can sound off. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. You can leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. You can follow APTN News to join the conversation and see all of our latest stories. Members of the Beaver Lake Cree Nation in Alberta are preventing their chief and council from accessing the band office. They say there's not enough financial transparency happening. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
On October 20th, band members erected a teepee on the grounds of the Beaver Lake Cree Nation Band Office and have been occupying here since. They're taking the rare step of blocking the access to the band office from leadership. Dozens of members have occupied the space. Evan Travis Cardinal is a band member. He told APTN that leadership has mismanaged funds and wants to know where oil and gas royalties have gone from leasing land. He also wants to know why the nation's detox center has closed.
So the band has no information on what's going on with the reservation and what's coming in the reservation. According to our finances, we don't know. And that's why the people got together, the band members of Beaver Lake Cree Nation.
Vernon Leonard Gladue says lack of communication and not having a band meeting for 2 years is unacceptable.
They have told us over and over, if you guys want some stuff, come and ask us, and they'll give it to us. And we've been through that. Phone the administrator, they don't return calls. How can we get that stuff without being, responded to?
APTN spoke to Chief Jermaine Anderson over the phone. She declined to comment on the situation. On Beaver Lake's social media, she and council posted a statement saying, "The COVID pandemic has made it difficult to properly communicate." It also says there were incidences of hate speech and threats of violence towards leadership. Chief Anderson sent APTN a statement on Friday, reading in part. One immediate consequence is that the nation is unable to conduct its ordinary business, including issuing income support checks to approximately 56 vulnerable nation members, issuing support payments to the nation's 12 post-secondary students, paying wages to certain employees, and making payments to certain contractors. Chief and Council sent an injunction to stop the gathering and allow access. Cardinal says, for now, they won't follow that injunction.
All we want to do is come up with a resolution where everybody benefits equally from our reservation and to have no favoritism going on in our reservation.
Last week, membership said they wanted to meet with band members to end the standoff, but so far, no meetings are planned. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Beaver Lake, Cree Nation.
Well, it's time for us to take a break, but when we come back, calls for a national inquiry into the 60s scoop. Stay with us. '60s Scoop survivors and Manitoba Indigenous organizations are calling for a national inquiry into the '60s Scoop. Today, Manitoba Kiwet Nawi Okimakanak Southern Chiefs organization and the '60s Scoop Legacy of Canada all joined forces to call on the federal government to commission an inquiry into tens of thousands of Indigenous children who were scooped from their families and placed in non-Indigenous homes as a result of government policies from the 1950s to the 1980s. Both MKO and SCO have also recently passed resolutions for long-term funding support for survivors who were disconnected from their families and their culture.
One of the messages that we've heard from survivors is the need for a national inquiry. It's important that we dig into the '60s Scoop and the government policies of Indigenous child removal to determine how many children were taken, where they were taken to, and the long-term effects of trauma and permanent child removal.
British Columbia has launched a COVID-19 vaccine booster program as the next step in their immunization plan. Booster doses will be available to the most at risk from now until December. Invitations for booster doses will first go to people who are vulnerable and to Indigenous populations over age 12. It will expand to residents over age 12 starting in the new year. BC Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry says the vaccines are highly effective, but there is a decline over time.
Absolutely recommended for people who are over age 70 in the community, for people in long-term care and assisted living, for our Indigenous people who we know are differentially affected and for a variety of reasons are being more exposed to the vaccine, to the virus right now because of outbreaks we're seeing in communities.
When catastrophe strikes, Northerners are quick to help out, but when the cost of doing so is too high, giving a helping hand can prove challenging. Our reporter Charlotte Mort-Jacobs explains how a good deed was met with a whopping price tag.
Bottled water is not typically a priority item until now, in Iqaluit's current water crisis. But shipping will cost you, big time. This bottled water was going to cost $3,000 to ship from Yellowknife to Iqaluit on Canadian North. The Yellowknifers who organized the water donation were surprised at the cargo's price tag.
We had it arranged, and the person in Iqaluit was going to, distribute it to people that were, less mobile and more people at risk, right? And they wouldn't even give her like a discounted rate, like a cargo rate. They're supposed to be the airline of the North and, partially Indigenous owned. And, it was really disappointing.
Canadian North says they've shipped close to 2 million pounds of bottled water in partnership with the territorial government.
We focused our efforts on supporting the government of Nunavut because they've been bringing in water and distributing it to the community at no charge.
The airline says they haven't come out with a general discount for individuals or organizations looking to ship water. But at least the Yellowknife donation went to good use, given to the local day shelter. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Well, it's time for another break, but when we come back, I'll tell you all about a new spin on the old Granny Hanky. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Rima Quintel sent in her granddaughter's impressive pumpkin carving skills. The glow of the orange coming from the otherwise darkened pumpkin looks really good. We love seeing shots that you take around your home or out in the bush. Keep them coming. You can email them to share@aptn.ca. You might be our next photo of the day. Let's check out tomorrow's weather forecast now. On the east coast, we have 12 in showers for St. John's, 12 in sunshine for Halifax. Happy Valley, Goose Bay, 7 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud. Flurries expected for Kuujjuaq, -4. Saguenay, sunshine and 6. Gaspé, 8 and sunny. 8 and rain expected for Ottawa. North Bay, 3 but mostly sunny. Thunder Bay, 3 and mostly sunny as well. 0 and a chance of flurries for Sioux Lookout. 0 and chance of flurries for Thompson and Norway House. 1 in sunshine for the Paw. 1 and a chance of flurries for Winnipeg, Dauphin, sunshine and 1. Lots of sun in southern Saskatchewan. 3 in Saskatoon, 2 in Regina and Estevan. 3 for Buffalo Narrows. 2 and sunshine for Uranium City. Sunshine for the northern part of Alberta, 2 in Fort Chip and Fort McMurray. 5 in sunshine for Edmonton, 9 in sunny in Medicine Hat. 10 and mostly sunny for Kamloops and Penticton, 7 and cloud for Quesnel. Smithers, 3 in sunshine, 4 in Prince George, cloudy skies there. 1 in sunshine for Dawson City, -5 in flurries for Old Crow. Norman Wells, -10 and flurries. Wrigley, -8 with a mix of sun and cloud. Inuvik, -5. Tuktoyak, -5 as well, with chance of flurries. -7 in sunshine for Baker Lake, -11 and sunny in Newyacht. Kenite, -3, mostly sunny. Clyde River, flurries, -4. A Yukon artist is transforming the Granny Hanky, and she's using her own beading and a little bit of technology to do so. Here's Sarah Connors with that story.
Kaylin Baker is trading needle and thread for an iPad and a stylus, putting a new spin on an age-old accessory.
So this is kind of a nod to that.
This hanky is part of a new line of Indigenous granny hankies. They feature blown-up images of Baker's beadwork, like this hanky.
Isolated the fireweed from a previous purse, or the hummingbird.
Baker says she got the idea for hankies while working on a project for a Canada Council grant earlier this summer. After ordering some online, she says she was amazed by how good they looked.
It turned out so well, and the colors really came through, and I just it was real. I thought this could happen. I'm gonna try.
1 month in, Baker has already had 300 orders, some from as far away as New Mexico. Even Indigenous influencers like Peachsicle on TikTok are sporting her designs.
The fact that people, love it, it just makes me feel really, really great.
She says it's a tedious process to create a hanky. Each design takes around 10 hours to complete.
I think that doing all that beadwork for all these years kind of really prepared me mentally and just to be able to sit there all day and isolate one bead at a time.
The process starts with Baker taking photos of completed beadwork. Using her iPad, she separates the beadwork from the background, then plans the design of the hanky. While it's more technology-focused than traditional beading, Baker says the creative process is similar.
It does take a long time, and it is very special to me, and each piece is has its own story.
Baker hopes to eventually integrate artwork from elders and youth in her home community of Pelly Crossing into the hankies.
There's so many talented artists from Pelly Crossing, and if I could just kind of help give back in that way, I would really love to do that and to help out.
She's collaborating with other Indigenous entrepreneurs like Yukon Soaps Company, which will use an upcoming hanky design for soap packaging. With more requests for orders rolling in, Baker is excited to see where the hanky business takes her.
It's been amazing to see how much of a impact it makes on people when it's just something that I just sit here and do.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Pelly Crossing is a beautiful community, and if anybody has me on their Christmas list, I would like one of those granny hankies. Well, we can't leave without sharing a little bit of Halloween excellence with you. This is from a group of kids in Oklahoma who dressed up as their favorite Indigenous TV stars. Carrie Whitlow's daughter and friends went as the cast from Res Dogs, which follows a group of teens living on an Oklahoma Indian reservation. The show stars Canadian actress Devry Jacobs from Ganawage, Quebec, and Paulina Alexis from Nakota Sioux Nation in Alberta. As soon as Whitlow's daughter Violet watched the show and heard Alexis speak in Cree, she wanted to dress up for her for Halloween.
See contemporary representation of Native Americans are present, and we're contemporary, and we're doing great things in our communities, and this is what our kids go through, and the things that Reservation Dogs highlights that it's very, very easy to connect with, and I'm so happy that my daughter gets to see that and take part, and for her it was no hesitation that that's who I want to be, and it's great.
Well, that is a wrap on your Indigenous news to kick off the week and a brand new month. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.
Free, and they helped the people. The people needed them. They didn't need people.